Let's talk about the future of poverty. Have you heard that phrase even once from Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, or anyone else? The future of poverty. The poor you will have with you always. It's an issue we think about less and less because we rely on minimum wage more and more, right? And it's not just that we rely on minimum wage pragmatically, right? We rely on it ideologically too, right? Minimum wage represents a tremendously appealing ideal for our society. Minimum wage presents to us the ideal that you don't have to give a tip to the doorman who opens and closes the door for you when you exit your apartment building because he's making enough. He's making enough money to have a decent quality of life no matter how humble his job may be. It's the ideal that, Amazon.com, a huge company like this, Amazon, they don't have to worry about the guys who work in their warehouse stealing from them because they know these guys are being paid enough, whether it's $10 an hour or $15 an hour, that they are earning a decent wage to have a decent quality of life. That at the hospital, they shouldn't have to fear the janitors, the people who sweep the floor and take out the garbage. They shouldn't have to fear the janitors and the people who do the laundry stealing from the patients, stealing medication from the doctors to sell on the black market because they are being paid enough. Many of the fundamental tensions in our society that you could read in novels from the 19th century, not that long ago, disappeared because of minimum wage. But we also stopped thinking about the future of poverty, right? Now, I was raised with a very powerful misconception. I don't know if you grew up with this also. I was raised with the pyramidal diagram of our society, a triangle, really, not so much a three-dimensional pyramid, to be perfectly honest. The idea that there's a small social class of the wealthy, of the elite, at the top of the pyramid, and that their wealth comes from oppressing the people at the bottom. And that the larger the number of those poor people at the bottom, and the more oppressed they are, and the less they're paid, then the wealthier the people at the top will be. That there's a reciprocal relationship between these things. That the riches of the richest people among us really are a consequence of the poverty of the poor. And that from the perspective of captains of industry, the perspective of executives who own huge corporations, and from the perspective of the elite in power in our government, the more poor, the better. The less they're paid, the better. The more oppressed they are, the better. Because who benefits? The people at the top of that pyramid. Now, this is false. And it's false in a very simple arithmetic sense. Look at how much a lawyer or doctor or professor pays in taxes. Take the time, get a pencil and paper if you don't believe me. I've gotten lots of fan mail from people who don't believe me. Try to calculate how much someone pays in taxes in your country. It's easy to Google this stuff. How much would someone pay in income tax if they earn $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, $300,000 a year? You may have never thought about it. Those people pay a lot in taxes. They really do. Now calculate how much a person will pay in taxes if they only earn $20,000 a year. All right? There's a really important arithmetic sum missing, and that is the cost to the government in lifetime benefits. The person who only earns $20,000 a year, and wherever you're living, they probably pay very little in taxes or maybe nothing at all. That person still received an education provided by the taxpayer. They'd probably receive more medical benefits provided by the taxpayer because a lot of rich people buy things for themselves that they could get for free from the government. It's a little bit different in every country, but nevertheless, the total cost to the government is higher for the poor, especially the poorest of the poor. And this person, even if they're hale and hearty today, they're healthy, eventually they're going to retire. Eventually they're going to grow old and die, and then they're going to cost the government even more. So when you do full life cycle analysis, looking at the life of one poor person or 100 poor people or 1,000 or 1,000,000, what you realize is the government is not getting rich by oppressing the poorest of the poor. The parasitic relationship is between the government and the wealthy. It's the wealthy who provide the government with money, and the government really does redistribute that to the poorest of the poor. Sometimes just in terms of money, food stamps, money, unemployment payouts, the dole, as the British say. Sometimes it's just literally the government is taking money from the rich and giving money to the poor. But much more profoundly, the government is spending millions and billions of dollars to provide services and benefits to the poor they otherwise could not enjoy, whether that is running water or electricity or education or the ability to ride on a train or a bus. All of these things are subsidized to an unbelievable extent every day that we take advantage of and take for granted. And it's the poorest of the poor who benefit most and pay the least. They may in taxes pay nothing at all, but when you do the math, when you subtract the benefits from the taxes over a full life cycle, the poor cost the government money. They don't make the government money. And then what's harder for people to accept is that for almost every business you can imagine that exists in the 21st century in a Western democracy, this is also true about the minimum wage people in a corporation, in a gold mine, in a law firm. Let's start with the law firm as the simplest example. Okay, you think the law firm gets rich by paying the janitor as low a wage as possible? The owner of this law firm may have a black heart, may be a terrible person. He may want to pay the janitorial service less than minimum wage, and that's bad. And I'm morally opposed to that. I don't believe in economic efficiency at all costs. It's more economically efficient for him, yes, if he can pay the janitor as little as possible. Right? But the janitor is not producing the value, the product, the output of this corporation, this law firm in this case, right? The janitor is kind of a drag on productivity. They need him. They need someone to take out the garbage and sweep the floor. You don't want the lawyers wasting their time. They need someone to wash the windows, let's say. Things like this that are quite time consuming, and people can't just put down their legal briefs and start washing the windows, or at least maybe they could, but that's not the way this particular law firm is organized. It's not organized on such egalitarian principles. I know a lot of schools in Japan that are organized that way, where the schools say, no, the teachers are the janitors. The teachers wash the windows. Everyone takes turns. You can do it. You can try. But in any case, this law firm, they may want to pay the janitor as little as possible. The productivity, the profitability of the law firm entirely concerns people who are paid much, much more than minimum wage. And they work together. Their productivity comes out of a cluster. The job they do couldn't be done by just one person sitting alone at a desk. And it's so profitable. It's so productive running this law firm that they can afford to pay their janitor $10 an hour, and they can afford to increase his wage to $15 an hour with no significant impact on the law firm. Even if they have 10 janitors, maybe they have janitors and a bunch of other people, that's fine. It is a drag on productivity, but that's what's good for society as a whole. That's what government wants, is to have this higher minimum wage. Why? We don't want the janitor having to drive his car 2 hours a day because he can't afford to live in the same neighborhood where he works, or he can't afford to live within, a couple kilometers of where he works. He has to travel a huge distance every day. I remember there was a restaurant in Cambodia where they were paying a man. I think he was mostly doing the gardening, but he was paid at the lowest level for this restaurant. So gardening and janitorial work or what have you. And I was just in the room when the owner of the restaurant, who was Italian, was talking to his main member of Cambodian staff who translated back and forth for him. And he was shocked and horrified to find that this guy was coming and sleeping in the garden every night. And the woman explained, look, you pay this guy a wage, you pay him a salary to mow the lawn, and they had beautiful flowers all around this restaurant. They really a very memorable restaurant in many ways. You pay this guy to, set up the orchids and mow the lawn and keep this place looking beautiful, right? He comes from a small village. He can't afford to live in downtown Phnom Penh. He can't afford to live in the big city. He can't afford to live anywhere where he could get back and forth, to work every day, okay? There are really terrible social conflicts that emerge from paying people less than a living wage. It makes everyone's life miserable. It makes all society miserable. All society is on the edge of revolution and violence all the time just because people aren't being paid enough by firms that can afford to pay them, all right? The gold mine. Mining remains in our mind's eye an image of terrible oppression. We imagine that the way gold mining works is by having one captain of industry, one owner of the mine, exploiting some enormous number of workers at the lowest wage possible, right? Get it as close to slavery as possible. And that's what makes a gold mine profitable. Nonsense. It's not true. All right. Today, in the year 2020, you look at a gold mine, the people paid minimum wage, they will be janitors. They might be people like security guards, right? The profitability and the productivity of the mine entirely rests with people who are more highly skilled, harder to replace, right, with special technical skills at a higher level of the mining firm. There are people who are testing the walls of the mine shaft for structural integrity. There are safety engineers. There are geologists. There are scientists of every kind. But even if you look at the guys who do the drilling, the guys who operate the drilling machine in a mine, you are going to find they are paid much, much more than minimum wage. And the gold mine, they can't afford to pay the janitors, the lowest paid staff they've got. They can't afford to pay them $10 an hour, and they can't afford to pay them $15 an hour. And it's good for a whole society if the government forces them to pay these people $10 an hour, $15 an hour. But the reality is the owner of the gold mine is not getting rich by oppressing those people or by pushing them down to the lowest salary possible. The reality is that the profitability of the gold mining firm, not so different from that law firm, it's being produced by a cluster of highly paid people, not necessarily at the top, in the middle and the top of the corporation, but far above the minimum wage, right? And those people, they couldn't be productive in that way working alone, right? One safety engineer working alone does not a gold mine make. One geologist is not worth that much. Oh, but you got all those people organized and working together. Now you're making billions of dollars. Now you have a gold mine, figuratively and literally, right? And out of that surplus, out of that amazing productivity and profitability, they can afford to carry along those minimum wage people. They can afford to provide the minimum wage people in their company with a good quality of life, with healthcare, with benefits, with the ability to live somewhere nearby and not have to sleep in the garden in front of their gold mine, not to have to be a hobo, not to be pushed down into poverty this way. From the government's perspective, in terms of designing a society in the government's interest, to the government's advantage, what they would want is an inverse pyramid. They would want a larger number of wealthy taxpayers and the fewest number possible of people subsisting on minimum wage or living in poverty below minimum wage. Now, there's another sort of difficult to pin down implicit assumption that the way our society operates reflects what is in the government's best interest, as opposed to what's in the people's best interest or the interests of the poorest of the poor, who may be quite powerless in your political system wherever you're living, or maybe moderately powerless, depending on where you live. The United States has a border with a country called Mexico, all right? And as the minimum wage in the United States goes up and up and up, the temptation for any company, for any venture, is to relocate their manufacturing south of the border to Mexico, where they can pay all of the employees dramatically less. Part of my reason for making this video now, in the last months of the year 2020, is that the prospect of a dramatic increase in minimum wage in the United States is on the docket once again. Perhaps ignored amongst the election promises of Joe Biden is that he will now raise the minimum wage in the United States to $15 per hour. $15 US per hour in the year 2020 is quite a lot of money. The view of minimum wage as something fundamentally parasitic, and not exclusive to the right-wing fringe, the view of the government forcing employers to pay more, and the assumptions about whose interest is that in and what is the benefit, these will again be called into question. One of the disadvantages of the United States increasing its minimum wage is simply that America is adjacent to Mexico. The computer I'm recording this on right now was manufactured in China. The camera was manufactured in China. I believe this lamp was manufactured in China. I wonder how many of these books were published. Maybe, pulp and paper industry is one of the last things we still do here in Canada. Almost everything I own is either made in China, Mexico, Bangladesh. Right? We've all lived through this. We've all seen this happen. Right? The disparity between the minimum wage in one country and another has profound warping effects on the whole economy. And when I read Bernie Sanders, what I see is that he has no clear vision for the future of poverty. His only idea of the future is to go back to the past. It's just to promise that he's going to revive the car manufacturing industry in Detroit. That it's like Donald Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again." Like, oh yeah, in that post-World War II period, through the 1950s and 1960s, America had all this manufacturing power. Well, we can do it again. Can we? Can we? You can have a law firm that carries even a huge number of janitors. You can have a highly productive firm like Amazon paying a $15 an hour minimum wage. No question. Every hospital can afford not just to pay its doctors and nurses, a good wage, but they can pay the cleaning staff and the security guards and the people who do the laundry. They all matter too. Out of the profitability of the elite aspects of the company, you can lift up, you can carry the poor and provide them with a good quality of life, even though they can be replaced, even though from a strictly economic perspective in terms of efficiency, you could pay someone else way less to do the laundry. You could take the dirty laundry from the hospital beds and send it to Mexico and have someone there clean it and send it back, and you'd probably save money and the whole hospital would be more profitable. It's true. You can outsource everything. I was hearing the other day about newspapers that were outsourcing the writing of articles to the Philippines. So the newspaper articles are being written by journalists in the Philippines to be published in America. This is the problem. This is the riddle of our times. Bernie Sanders is looking at this and saying the future of poverty is the past, and that just can't be. Right? Not every industry is going to operate like a gold mine. Not every industry is going to operate like a law firm. Okay? Mass manufacturing, when you get into industries where there are more and more people at the bottom of that pyramid, people sitting at tables, taking pieces of cloth and stitching them together to make t-shirts. Right? Well, that's your whole company. There are just a couple of executives at the top, and then a huge number of minimum wage laborers manufacturing t-shirts. What's the future of that in the United States of America? And what is the future for the whole world when we embrace this kind of broken pyramid system where one part of the pyramid that's inverted, it's an upside-down pyramid, is here in the United States and Canada. And then the other part of the pyramid, all the mass employment, mass manufacturing industries, those are in China and Mexico. Okay, this is a rare video in which I'm not here to give you all the answers. That'd just be a separate video. Not that I don't have the answers. That'd be a separate video. I'm really here trying to emphasize something that was a misconception in my own youth because I was raised with this propaganda. I was raised with this misconception quite intentionally. It was inculcated into me the notion that our whole society is shaped like a pyramid, because the government itself grows rich from the oppression of the poor, that there's nothing the executive over at the gold mine wants more than to have huge numbers of employees being paid the absolute lowest wage possible, and that rather than the actual gold mining, is where his fortune comes from. Who's really thinking about the future of poverty, about having a society where the rich and poor can live together and work together? I'll tell you something. In the year 2020, it's not Bernie Sanders and it's not Donald Trump. The most dangerous element of the minimum wage is maybe that it works too well, that it lets us just not think about these most fundamental questions. Dun, 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 dun.